What's the party people in the place to be? And that's the question for the weekend. It's Memorial Day weekend. And when you go to a party and you wonder, hey, party people, are we in the place to be? Do you question, are you? Or are you in the wrong place and you're a party person? Or are you not a party person and you're in the right place? I don't know. It's confusing. It opens up a whole Pandora's box. But let me open up another one for you. Last week was a very intense week for me regarding a shift. Okay? Wasn't feeling well empathically. I was feeling everything in the fucking world. Literally, probably. And I got spooked. I hadn't been spooked in a long time, man. And in fact, it scared me so much that I was spooked, thinking that I'd been through enough, that I'm still a little rattled by the whole thing. But as a pushback from that, I, again, much like David Icke, had a flood of information coming into me. And tested it out last week, basically with myself and another friend who I entrust. And some extremely spectacular things occurred. Extremely spectacular things occurred that we were able to prove to one another. I don't want to get into the details of them. But on the side things, also, things are falling like dominoes pieces left and right. This is a small one, but anyone who's in like sociology and needs to do a sociology report, I suggest you do one on this, because you'll get an A, guaranteed. Okay. I've always mentioned, whether it was back in the trendy fashion days, or it was regarding the awakening and the ascension, that there is something very unique about our generation. I have not ever seen anyone specifically reference Generation X, which I consider anyone pretty much between the ages of 15 and 55. They say it's 61 to 81 born. All right? It's the mind state of the people. Okay? But it's not just going to be about X. It might be right now. It's going to be about the millennials. It's going to be about the indigos. And they were being born in 78. Because eventually they're going to be the ambassadors for this planet, quite literally. But in the meantime, there's going to be an assault on them. There's going to be an attack. We still do have an enemy here. And that's why we have essentially a ground crew. Now, I had no fucking clue what information this was, how I was getting it. Well, I knew how I was getting it. But why I was translating it into basically what's turned into a wild sci-fi screenplay. That there was basically an unseen war going on with an enemy, and I did a little bit of research on this, that was at least 50 years advanced from us, and we could not see them. The entire plan was to control us, make us think that we're free and we're having a great time, that we can go out and make as much money as we want, but we're all a bunch of slaves. Do not ever let the humans know that they're slaves. So give them toys to play with, give them things to do, make them think they're happy, give them that cheese to chase in a wheel, in the rat's cage. Okay? And then I realized that when I had my awakening, two things had happened. One was I woke up to who I really was, but also I woke up to being essentially as if, it literally felt as if I had a lock taken off of my mind. It was weird. It literally felt that way. And that's exactly what happened. I became immune to whatever it is, and it's very powerful, that essentially programs at least 85% of the society. At least 85%. And in the Muslim religion, they call them the 85%ers. And there's a group known as the 5%ers. And these 5%ers are what? All wise. For they know who the true living God is. And they have a duty, and that is to tell others what they know. They're like robots. They will not stop in telling people that. What I began to realize was that the outside elements, which you can now best describe as our neighbors, they're not quite next door neighbors, very many miles away, but essentially next door neighbors. It's a big universe, it's a big neighborhood, it's a big city. We're all observing what was going on down here, and we were totally unaware that there were elements that were from the outside that were influencing individuals here, especially around the time of World War II, giving them technology, things like that. This is something that's well known. It's based off of something called Operation Paperclip. And without the knowledge of the U.S., or anyone in the world for that matter, basically very, very powerful mind control elements, propaganda, anti-propaganda, financial gain, greed was occurring on this planet. The planet has been getting raped. And the people that we've been blaming for that are simply puppets. Now, I don't want to get into all that right now. That's not really my department. It spooks me to think about it. But that's something you need to understand, is that we're not fighting against the Republicans or the Democrats. I'm not saying that they don't look like idiots, but what I'm saying is you're going to find out they're the actual prostitutes. All right? All right? It may seem like they're doing their own agenda. Think about it for a second. Everyone in the world wants you to do one thing, like when Obama got elected. Interesting fact there. Why? Because I think there's something unique about our generation. We were the first generation ever, and Obama was the first president ever, to get into office simply based off of one demographics. That was Generation X. In other words, never before in the history of this country had one age group alone, we were responsible for him getting in office. In other words, it's almost like the other age groups didn't count. Here's the weird part. As an American president, a tradition is to give rewards, tax breaks, funding to every single group, even the ones that were against you, like Republicans to Democrats, Democrats to Republicans, once you get into office. This has happened every time since America was founded, except this time. One group was not given shit. Generation X. But we got him in office. This is the same generation that said our vote wouldn't count. Our vote won't count. Rock the vote, man. You always say your vote doesn't count. Now we know what? Our vote didn't count. We were right. It's just not like you think. So basically that threw off one big problem right there. And now we became very much aware, because I don't know what people think about Trump or whatever, but if a brother could do it, trust me, anyone up even for the position of being president is being placed into that position. Okay? There's no such thing as an honest person being on television that could run for president. I'm sorry to tell you that, no matter how good they look. But basically, we as X means the unknown factor in math. We were supposed to be called the 13th generation because we are the 13th generation of the U.S. The most commonly used word amongst our generation is the word real. Keep it real, dog, keep it real. In sacred geometry, number 13 represents the word real. So we would be the real generation. The children of Israel returning. The Mayan prophecy mentions the 13th Ahau. The end times. Times symbol is what? It's an X. The end times. The 13th Ahau are the return of the 13th generation, or the wise ones. It would be the reincarnation of wise ascended masters coming back at a time where they needed to basically be gifted and teach others what they do not know. And that's essentially what's happening now when you're seeing people wake up. And as we wake up, we begin to learn miracle things about ourselves, about the planet, but really we're not learning anything new. As a brilliant person told me, you're not learning shit. You're remembering things that you had forgotten. You've always known this stuff. And this stuff is returning to me more and more and more. Now, I still have some problems giving a speech here and there, but at some point it comes to a supernatural level of some of the things that I'm able to do. It's really bizarre. This is happening more and more rapidly. But what's so amazing is it's as if all these things I did that I gave up on in the last 10 years, including all the things I said about our generation, you know, again, economic downfall. The worst part of 2007 to 2010, everyone was losing money, especially us, because that's when we bought houses. That's when we got married. That's when we bought stocks. Okay? We've been worst hit by that than any other demographic. We're the only one who has not recovered. It's so bad that 31% of anyone between the ages of 25 and 45, 31% need to live with their parents or live with a friend of the family or a relative. We have more college degrees than any other generation, yet we make less money and are the first generation to make less money than our parents ever will. Also, I mentioned before, we donated more money when we were losing our jobs, when everyone else was keeping every penny they had. We donated so much more money when the rest of the country went broke to charities and to good causes that we beat every other generation combined. There are so many things that they are deliberately not telling you about this generation. We make up 85.5 million. We are currently the most powerful group in this country, and you will not see one presidential candidate preach to you. Do you know why? Because who controls them? And they know who we are now. We have to be very cautious about that. Now, I always wondered if they knew who we were for sure, and I was pretty sure they did. But I had always studied and done my writings. Remember, my birthday is also my signifying number. 72. 8972. 8 times 9 is 72. It's the only date in a century that would come out as 72 being perfect. There have been 222 days in the year so far at 8972. 222. Book of Daniel, Revelation, and Book of Daniel. 222. He will be a revealer of secrets, for he knows what dwells in the darkness, yet light dwells within him. How do you think I got on Oprah? Think about it. No one's ever, you've never questioned how I just snapped my fingers and got on Oprah? Overnight. When that guy got crucified on TV. And she revealed a big book on her show. Remember, she was the one who talked about her famous book called Secrets. There you go. There's more code for you. I can go on and on and on and on and on and on and on for you. I have so much evidence, it's ridiculous. But the one I want to show you now is regarding our generation. They finally found out, and the scholars, some appear to be cool about it, but they seem to be a little shook up, have finally identified what I identified years ago. Years ago. And it's fascinating to see their reaction. It's fascinating to see them. This is new stuff. At least every video that I've seen, the only person I knew that was close to this was Farrakhan. That's why I always listen to Farrakhan. What made me go and find this? Who knows? Intuition. But this is the kind of thing that's being said right now against the great multi-religious groups as a new discovery, and it backs up 100% what I've been saying.
We honor his leadership. To open your Bibles, if you would, to Matthew chapter 24.
What? Sorry.
Matthew chapter 24. And before we get into this, I just again want to comment on what Ronnie Floyd shared. It was, you know, our common bond. So don't go like, wow, what's that? That's too heavy. That's too hard to understand. No, it's quite simple.
Listen.
But in a nutshell, I'll say this. It is the central event of wickedness in the Antichrist reign of terror that's coming in the days ahead. But more than that, or in addition to that, it is the most sinful human act and the most powerful demonic demonstration in human history that is coming together. Jesus is saying, in the days ahead, human sin is going to come to fullness, history, at that time of history. I believe the darkness is going to get darker. The distress is going to get more intense. Our sense of urgency and being alert as to what God is doing in this hour of history. Now, some preachers, they'll tell you a generation is 40 years. And it might be, but that's not necessarily a biblical concept. In Genesis 15, the very first time that a generation was ever defined in the Bible by God, audibly, a generation was 100 years. So I don't know if that generation that the Lord returns is a 100-year period, a 50-year period, I don't know. But I know that it's a little longer than some people are expecting, and I believe that it's very possible that some of you in this room will see the fullness of these things in your lifetime. I don't know that I will. I might. But I know this, that whatever happens in fullness in that generation at the coming of the Lord will be happening in part for the decades leading up to the coming of the Lord. Not a real popular subject, because there's unfold at the time of the Great Tribulation with great trouble around the earth. Many details were given to Daniel by the angel. And we're not going to go through all the details, but I want you to leave this meeting